What's up guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're doing some Premier League predictions. As you can tell, I'm a lot more energetic today. Why? Because people have been telling me over and over again that I'm not energetic enough in my videos. So today is the point where that all changes, and I am powering through this. Let's go. Alright, so I know what you're thinking. How can I do a Premier League predictions video? 2 weeks of the Premier League has already gone by. Well, that has only helped me gauge what I already knew, if that makes any sense. So I wasn't going to do it before the season started. I want to see how teams are going to perform, and 2 weeks is the perfect amount to see that. And some of my predictions have changed ever since the Premier League started. So it will be a little bit different, but I'll explain that as I go along. But without further ado, let's start my Premier League predictions. Alright, so in 20th place on the Schuben-Gunner League table, I'm going to say is a team that has done really poorly in recent years, but has always managed to sort of pull themselves back up and avoid relegation. And that's going to be Sunderland. Now, the main reason why I think Sunderland's going to be at the bottom of the table is because they are just a ridiculously frustrating team to watch. I can just imagine their fans are going to struggle with watching games. They're going to leave a lot of the games before they even end. And that's how it's been for the past couple of seasons. And this season, I see no change. And Sunderland, their manager, the players, they're just not taking much action. They sort of think that it's good enough to struggle for 30 games and then force yourself 8 games to stay up. But I don't think this season they're going to do a lot, because it's going to get more and more competitive, and Sunderland are never getting out of that sort of zone that they're forever in. But I think this season is the final season for them in the Premier League, and they are 20th right now after 2 weeks, and that just sums up my theory. Now, in recent years, the promoted teams sort of, not all of them go back down. Usually maybe 1 or 2 go down and another 1 or 2 stay up. But this season, I'm going to say that there'll only be 1 newly promoted team to go down, and that's going to be, for me, Norwich City. Now, Norwich City, out of the 3 promoted teams, they were the team that I think they were the team that played the playoff. Yeah, they were. But even so, they don't look any different than they were 2 years ago, and that is not a good thing. They haven't really improved. They have started decently, but I think that they could go back down this time, mainly because they're just not Premier League standard. They sort of feel like they're playing in the Championship still, and they've gotten lucky on a couple of occasions these past 2 weeks, but I don't think they can sustain that for the rest of the Premier League campaign, and that's going to result in them going back down, in my opinion. Now, obviously, I've just given it away, and I've said that only 1 team for me is going to go back down this season, which means in 18th place, it's not a newly promoted team. It's going to be West Bromwich Albion. Now, if anybody remembers Fulham in the 2013-14 season, Fulham were really poor. They kept switching manager. They were absolutely lost, but they weren't bad. This is the exact same position I find West Brom right now. Right now, they're 18th in the table, but that's slightly higher than I would have put them at the start of the season. West Brom is a team that are good. They can be good, but they don't push themselves hard enough. It's not like they're unlucky. It's not like they have referees against them. They just don't force the effort in, and that is a frustrating type of team to watch, and that for me is going to result in their relegation. Fulham 2 years ago kept on switching manager. They kept on playing different player styles. They had no idea what they were doing, and that's exactly what West Bromwich Albion find themselves right now. So in 18th place, I'm going to say West Brom. Now in 17th place, there's going to be quite a small margin, in my opinion, between 17th and 18th. And in 17th, I'm going to go with a newly promoted team by the name of Watford. Now, Watford are not a very good team according to the start of the season, but I'm still gonna go with my gut that was with me before the season started, and I'm gonna say Watford are good enough to stay in the season one more time. It's not going to be much of a gap between 17 and 18. I think Watford will find themselves in and out of the relegation zone, but this season I feel it's finally, they're not going to be that team, and they're going to pull themselves up. They're going to stay there for at least another season. So in 16th, there are a few teams I could go with, but for me, I'm going to go with a bit of a wild card. I'm going to go with Aston Villa. This is, a questionable one. I thought they weren't going to do very well at the start of the season. Obviously, with Benteke gone, with Delph gone, two of their biggest players without a doubt. And a lot of people may say, hey, they reached the FA Cup final last year, but Hull City reached the FA Cup final 2 years ago, and they played well in that one, and they still got relegated last season. So that's just my way of saying the FA Cup final is no way of gauging how your team is going to do. Of course, unless you're Arsenal and you've won it 2 years in a row. In that case, you're in for a great season. But I think Hull City, the same sort of situation as Aston Villa. And Aston Villa as well, they've sold some of their best players and they've just sort of shot themselves in the foot. And it's going to take a lot for them to not get relegated. But I do think they have that passion and drive about them that's good enough to not get them relegated, but not good enough to get them anywhere important. So in 15th place, there's another few teams I could go with, but in this occasion, I'm going to go with Newcastle United. Newcastle United is a really, really erratic team. They're definitely going to do better than they were last season. Last season, they started out really well, and then they absolutely just crashed and burned. From beating Chelsea 2-1 and ending their unbeaten record to losing to lower level teams, but Newcastle this season definitely have a bit more strength and willpower, but again they're really erratic. It's not like they're unlucky, they're just not strong enough mentally and physically to be winning anything right now. So 14th, I'm gonna go with the final newly promoted team, Bournemouth. Now Bournemouth are a really, really decent team. They're currently 19th in the table, I know, but before the start of the season, everyone was like, if there's a team going down that's been newly promoted, it'll be Bournemouth, because they have never been in the Premier League. They don't know what it's like. And you know what I say to that? Who cares? That doesn't matter. I mean, maybe it does matter a little bit that you don't have players that know the experience of the Premier League, but it's just another campaign, and if they are good enough to get promoted into this division, then they, I feel, are good enough to stay in it. Bournemouth, what separates them from the other newly promoted teams, I feel, is how they wear their heart on their sleeve every single game. They're really unlucky. They're an unlucky team, I'll say that. They hit the post a lot. They just don't have that firepower that is required, but they're a good team, and they're good enough to stay in the Premier League and good enough to get a finish of around 14th, but they are not good enough to finish in the top 10. But again, they're not bad enough to finish in the relegation zone. Okay, so now on to the top 13, and in 13th place, I'm going to go with West Ham. Now, West Ham is an interesting pick. West Ham are an okay team, they are an unlucky team again, sort of always each season. If you think about it, the sort of 12th to 15th place teams are really unlucky, and West Ham are one of those teams. And even though they beat Arsenal, that's great and all for them, and I may have cried a lot in that game, and I may have cried a lot in that game, and I may have cried a lot in that game, and I may have cried a lot in that game, and I may have cried a lot in that game, and I may have cried a lot, I may have cried a lot, I may have cried a lot, I may have cried a lot. But West Ham are a team that can pull off very shocking results and also wear their heart on their sleeve a lot of times, and that's what I'm going to say. is going to happen to them this season. Now, in 12th place, I'm going to go with a bit of a wild card. And I'm going to say Swansea. Now, the thing about Swansea is that they are such a good team. They can do it. They do have the players. It's not like they're low. And they're not anywhere close to relegation for me any season that they're in. But they are a team that just don't finish off games. They don't win enough for me. And again, that's down to luck. Like I said, that zone of players get very unlucky very often, and this is another example of a team that just cannot seem to finish, but they can pull off great results, and that's going to give them enough points for a 12th place finish. Alright, so moving on to 11th place, just missing out on the top 10 finish, I'm going to go with Leicester. Now, Leicester have started the campaign really well, and I knew that they were going to do reasonably well this season. And before the Premier League started, I think I would have said something like 12th or 13th, but they sort of pushed a bit higher on my list. They're going to go in 11th, and for me, they are the version of West Ham last season. West Ham last season started incredibly well. They were doing brilliantly for the first half of the campaign, then for the second half they sort of depleted because they didn't have the stamina of the players and stuff. And that's, for me, is the ideal Leicester this season. They're going to do well for the first half, then they're going to fall back out of the title race perhaps, or the Champions League race. And they're going to miss out on some privileges, but I think they do have the capacity and the willpower that they carried on from last season when they pulled off that absolutely ridiculous escape by beating, it's all the teams pretty much except for Chelsea. Moving on to the top 10, and this is where it gets a bit sticky. But in number 10, I'm going to say Everton. Now, Everton, for me, they're always going to be around the mid-table zone. And that's because their manager, Roberto Martinez, for me, is not good enough. He's an okay manager. He's good. He knows what to do with his players. He's definitely positive. But, he's not the type of manager that, sort of pushes his players enough. He doesn't scold his player enough. For example, if Everton's losing 4-0 or something at halftime, the difference between a manager like Alex Ferguson and a manager like Roberto Martinez is that Alex Ferguson would say, all of you are getting sacked if you don't make a great comeback, and Ferguson would probably throw a shoe at someone or something. But Roberto Martinez is the sort of player that says, keep it up, do what you're doing, it's okay, we'll think about the next game. That isn't really the best attitude for a manager, but I think that is sort of their downfall at the moment. Everton, they do have the players, Ross Barkley, Romelu Lukaku, they have great players, but again, they don't have the capacity and willpower to drive themselves further than a 10th place finish for me. Now, in 9th place, I'm going to go ahead and say Southampton. Now, before the season started, I would have said Southampton is not going to reach the heights they reached last season, but they're still going to be in the top 10. And the reason why they won't feel like they'll reach the heights of last season is because there's obviously more expectation on them. Last season, people expected them to get relegated because they sold all their good players, and they ended up finishing 7th, which is absolutely mental. But this season, I think, they sold another great player in Nathaniel Klein, and they're not bad. They're not bad. They can definitely pull off the right results, and they're definitely another team that wears their heart on their sleeve every single game, and that's going to get them to a top 10 finish and a 9th place finish. But honestly, if, let's say, they kept Lallana, Lambert, Klein, all these players, they could honestly be challenging in the top 4 or 5. But Southampton, for me, are going to be the type of team that challenges a decent cup run. I'm going to tip them to win the Carling Cup or the Capital One Cup, but more on that later. Now, in 8th place, we're going to go with an interesting one. We're going to go with Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace are somewhat the Southampton of this season. But they're not really dark horses, are they? People do expect them to do well. They have pulled off some great results in the past, and they can play really good football, and they have some great players like Balassi, Jedinak, Delaney, all these very strong assets for them. And they're looking strong, and they're playing good football, and they're playing very attractive football, but sometimes they do get unlucky. But I think they can really push forward and enter the top 8 this season. Now, this next one is probably going to be a bit of a controversial pick, but I want you all to listen very closely. You're probably thinking the only sort of non-top 6 team that I haven't mentioned yet is Stoke. And Stoke is not my number 7 pick. It's actually going to be Spurs. Now, Spurs for me are just not impressive at all. And I am an Arsenal fan, and maybe I'm being a bit biased here, but honestly, Spurs just don't pull off the right results at times. Even the other day, they were leading 2-0 with less than 20 minutes left, and, Stoke City ended their run. And, Spurs are just a team that are frustrating to watch again if you're a Spurs fan, but for me, I'm an Arsenal fan, so I guess it is enjoyable to watch them. But they're just not looking good, and somehow each season they claw themselves into the top 6. But I can imagine, as a Spurs fan, someone who is a Spurs fan could feel really disappointed with them season in, season out, because they don't really win anything, and they don't really give top-notch performances besides maybe against Chelsea last season. That was probably the best I can think of. But, they do get results sometimes, but it's not enough for a reasonable team like Spurs. So now we're going into the top 6, and you're probably wondering if I haven't mentioned Stoke yet, and I've gone and put Spurs in 7th, then that means Stoke must be in 6th. And yes, they are my number 6 pick. Stoke City is going to be my number 6 pick because they have revitalized their team so much. Look at their players right now. They've got such a decent team. They've got Shaqiri. Okay, Shaqiri signed for them. I'm pretty sure he signed for them, right? They've got Boyan, who was brilliant last season. I think just the strike force just has to improve a little bit. Their defense is rock solid. They're absolutely ridiculous to go up against at the Britannia Stadium. I think they've sold Begovic. That's a bad decision on their part. And they need a good striker. And besides that, they are a really good team. And I think they could be playing some very good Europa League football this year, or rather next year, because I think they are going to get into that top 6 place and earn themselves a spot in Europe. So, the 5th team is going to be another wild card, and I want you all to stick with my predictions here. And I know some of you are just going to be like, nope, I'm going to turn off the TV or the computer or whatever. But my number 5 pick is going to be last season's title winners. It's going to be Chelsea. Okay, I'll be honest here. Before the season started, the prediction for Chelsea, for me, would have been 3rd. Okay? But I'm going to push them down to 5th. Mainly because there are 4 teams better than them. And they don't look good at the moment. If I had said they had finished 3rd, then there would be 2 better teams than them, which I would have revealed. Which I will reveal later. But even then, there would be the 4th and 5th place teams, which have now overtaken Chelsea, in my opinion. And I'll get back to those teams later, obviously. But this has just like shown me Chelsea are not a driving team, They don't look like they really are going to push forward for another team. They sort of feel, this season, for me, when I watch them, they sort of feel like, you know what, we won it last season, who cares now? And that's sort of the attitude I'm getting from them, because they're so clumsy in every aspect of the field. They had a rock-solid defense last season. Now, John Terry's getting substituted after a few games. What's the problem with that? Courtois gets sent off after 1 game, the first game of the season. It's ridiculous. And it's embarrassing for Chelsea fans to be watching their team perform like that. And right now they're in 16th, but there's no question they do have the capacity with Pedro and all the new signing to pull themselves back up to a decent finish. And fifth for me is not a decent finish for them, especially if they're title winners. But I honestly think if that does happen and this current form of theirs carries on, Jose Mourinho is definitely getting sacked. At least at the end of the season. Jose Mourinho is just, he doesn't have his head in the right place right now. I don't know what's going on with him, but it's not good. It's good for me since I'm an Arsenal fan and I enjoy Jose Mourinho wrecking himself. But I think now Mourinho is he's concerning himself too much in the talk and stuff in the press conferences. And, if you want to say stuff like, whatever, Mourinho saying bad stuff about Wenger, back that up on the field. And that's what they did in the past. But now they're just looking absolutely shambolic. And I don't think Chelsea fans will be too happy with them. So that means that, as I said, my previous 4th and 5th teams are going to move up to 3rd and 4th. And in 4th is going to be, for me, Liverpool. Liverpool was originally meant to be 5th in my table. And the only reason I'm absolutely pushing them up is because I think Chelsea's going to do badly. But 4th place Liverpool, Liverpool are okay. They're sort of scraping through games, which I don't think people will be too happy about. They're a nervous team to support, I can imagine. But, I think in the end they're going to pull off a decent finish in 4th and get some Champions League football back. And they're looking strong. They're obviously making some reasonably questionable, but yet at the same time good marketing decisions. They brought in Benteke, which is great. Milner can be great, I guess. He's very underrated. Not too sure on their signing of Danny Ings, though, but, it's not bad. They could do with some much better signings, there's no question about that, but I think they have revitalized the team, and Coutinho only gets better every game, every season, every moment. They've sold Sterling, which I think could be a big loss for them. But Sterling isn't exactly adding to the City team at the moment. We'll get back to him in a second, though. But for me, Liverpool are doing okay this season. They're not going to be great, but they're going to finish well enough to end the top 4 and get some Champions League football back on track. Now, 3rd place is obviously my previous 4th place prediction. That's going to be Manchester United. Once again, the only reason I'm pushing them up is because I think Chelsea is doing badly. Nevertheless, last season and this season, they're finally finding their feet, and I think they will get some Champions League football again. They beat Club Brugge the other day 3-1, which means pretty much they're going to qualify for the Champions League this season. And I think they're going to do it again next season, and they won't even have to go for a playoff, according to my prediction. 3rd place is a good finish for Man United. They're going to go up and up each season. They're going to get a bit better, but I think they are a nervous team to support once again. And they are a difficult team to watch. Even if you're not supporting them, you sort of get frustrated watching them because you sort of think, why do they look so shaky? It's kind of funny to watch them at times, though. But United, I think they will be good enough. They have been good enough in recent times, and they will pull off 3rd place. The moment of truth. Okay, before I say my actual prediction, let me say my prediction before the season started. Before the season started, I would have said City 2nd place, Arsenal 1st place. And like I said, I had to watch the first 2 games of the Premier League to get a proper idea. That's why for this final prediction, I'm going to swap the 2. And I'm going to say Arsenal to finish 2nd. That's the highest they finished in a very long time. And I'm going to say City to win the league. Now, City, I knew they were going to do well this season. I knew they're definitely going to challenge for the title before the season started. But before the season started, I was so pumped up. I was definitely being a bit biased. There's no question about it. I was like, Petr Cech, yes, we're going to win the league. We're going to finally do it. I still think we're going to win a trophy this season, but I'll get back to that later. 2nd place, let's talk about that first. They're going to finish higher than they've done in a long time. I mean, I don't even remember the last time Arsenal finished second. I started supporting Arsenal at the start of the 2010-11 season, and my history with them has been third place in 2010-11, fourth place in 2011-12, fourth place in 2012-13, fourth place in 2013-14, and third place in 2014-15. Now, that's not exactly a great Premier League finishing for a team like Arsenal, but I think they're just going up and up and up, and I'd say in less than 3 seasons' time, the title will go to Arsenal. But for this season, I just think their inconsistency is going to bite them back, and they're going to be good. They're going to definitely win important games, but I think there's only just one team that will beat them. And honestly, I think City, the last time they won the league was 2013-14, wasn't it? Yeah. And, they won it by a fair margin. But this season, I think they will have quite a big gap of maybe 9 or 10 points above Arsenal, who I think will be in second place. But City right now look incredibly strong. I knew they'd shored up their team with Raheem Sterling and all, but I've seen them play, and they're absolutely devastating. 6 goals, 6 points, no goals conceded. They're literally the perfect Premier League team right now. They're even better than how Chelsea started the league last season, and that's all I have to say. City's going to win the league this season, in my opinion. You can say in the comments. I know people are going to tell me this. They're going to say, oh, you're a bandwagon. You don't want your team to win the league. Obviously, I want my team to win the league. I want Arsenal to win the league so badly. But I just think realistically, City is having it this year. Now, let's move on to some domestic competitions. Let's move on to some of the cups let's start with the smallest, the Capital One Cup. I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to say Southampton for the Capital One Cup because they do feel like that team that's going to win that cup this year. Now, for the FA Cup, I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say Arsenal. Obviously, that's based on the fact that they've won it 2 years in a row, but, I think it's possible for them to retain it, and I do think they will win the FA Cup this season. Now, for the biggest one, the Champions League. I'm going to go ahead and say Bayern Munich for the final again. Obviously, it's sort of just changing between Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Barcelona. But I think, again, Bayern Munich are going to win. But I think that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you guys so much for listening in this very relatively long video. And hopefully this season can be a great season. Cheers to all Arsenal fans out there, and thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out. And the girl with the bio of IDEK. Okay, this girl is named Louis. I have a friend named Louis, but he's a guy. I don't quite know how to react to that. Moving on. Oh, I go with 3 interests. One of them is bound to be Arsenal, isn't it? No, it's 8 fact, dude perfect, and silent and happiness. Brilliant. Just at this point, really just can't be asked. I just can't.